this video, I will give you everything you need to know about the Canon EOS R6 from a beginner's perspective, covering important first-time use, and we will be starting with the camera body. With the upcoming R10 and more specifically the R7, I would say the R6 is more relevant than ever actually. I've been using the camera for about a year, more or less daily for the last couple of months, and I use it professionally both for photography and videography. And I wanted to sort of start with the physical aspects of the camera. I want to go over the layout, the physical buttons on top, the sides, the bottom, which more or less is the battery compartment, and I want to finish off with the backside, and then we can dig into the menus. The R6 is, I think, depends if you want to say it's big or small, because I have huge hands, so it's kind of hard to see the physical size of it. So I'm going to put it down here, and wait a minute. This is a can of Coke, and this is the camera. I think it's much easier than to sort of start to do dimensions in various ways. I will mention weight, because it is 598 grams, no battery, no cap, no cards, basically the body clean. If we put the battery, some SD cards and the cap, it's going to be 680 grams or 1.5 pounds. So it's you can feel the quality. That's without using a cage. And if you don't know what a cage is, you can, I have two here, camera cages. This one is from SmallRig, this one is from 8zin. This is a little bit more exclusive, it is better, I like it more for video. This is lighter, but it also has a little bit of play in it, so that's why I like this one. I'm not covering camera cages either, but if you are curious, leave a comment in the sections below and I will answer them if you're curious why do I prefer the 8zin over SmallRig, for example. I also have a Tilta cage, but I sold that one because I like the SmallRig better. Back to the camera. On top of the camera we will find all the important settings. You have the power on and off button, easiest with your left thumb. It has a little notch you can use to turn it on or off. You also have the hot shoe mount, for example if you want to mount an on-camera flash. The most important function for the camera is the mode wheel. As a beginner we often start with the green automatic mode, but you also have aperture priority, shutter priority. You have some sort of hybrid between manual mode and automatic mode, and of course the M for manual mode. That's where I often leave my camera. Right index finger, you can reach the trigger to take photos, and in factory settings, when you press the trigger halfway, you also activate autofocus. The red button is to start video recording, and video recording is a little bit different depending on if the camera is set into a photography mode or if the knob is turned to video, but more on that later when we go into the menus. The M-FN button is actually a really important button, because that's where you will find settings for switching to high burst mode, or if you want to do a self-portrait and want like a 10-second timer, you need to activate that with the MFN button. You also have two turning wheels, especially important when doing menu navigation or when the camera is set into any of the non-automatic mode, because then they are for adjusting aperture or shutter speed. And we have a lock button to lock the camera. That was the top of the camera and the physical sort of main buttons. We have buttons on the back as well, but I'm gonna go from the top to the sides and especially the ports of the camera. Turning the camera to the side, we have all the access ports. There's some silicone rubber protection, so just use your fingers to open the lid, and there you find the HMI port. And it's a micro HMI, and this is a port you need to be very careful with. We also have a microphone in and a headphone out port, and if you use a wired trigger, it's the last one.
Don't forget to put the port protections back, especially if you're taking your camera outside and it's humid or if it's raining, because you don't want the water going into your ports.
We're gonna move from the port side to the other side and the SD card compartment.
The Canon R6 has 2 memory card slots, and we can configure the camera to use them a little bit different. And I'm going to show you that when we go over the menu. Push the lid backwards to open the memory card compartment. Just insert 1 or 2 memory cards, click them in or out to remove or add a memory card. And then you just push the lid forward to close it.
Next, we're gonna move to the front of the camera and to show how to put the lens on. 1 second. This is a Canon 85mm EF lens. It's an L lens, so it's a professional series. It's a very popular lens for portrait photography. I will not use the lens because it's quite heavy, it's 1 kilogram. But instead I'm gonna use, let me put that away. I'm gonna use the R, because the Canon R6 is an R camera. I'm going to use the R to EF adapter because it's very small, just to show you how to put lens on.
On the front, we're actually going to start with a button I learned just recently. It's a little bit of a hidden secret. If you press this button, the camera will show you your actual depth of field before you take a photo. It works both for the in-camera screen as well as in the viewfinder, so it's very helpful if you are doing shallow depth of field. To put on a lens, you can just twist the lens cap. You don't need to push the button. I'm going to put on the EF to RF adapter, but it works the same thing with the lens. So you just align the red marker to the camera's red marker. Ensure that you put it in straight. And it gives you a little bit of resistance. And then you just twist until you hear a click. To release a lens, press the lens release button. Start to twist. And then you twist until it comes off. Always protect your sensor, so if you don't have any lens, immediately put on the protection cap for your camera. And that's how you add or remove the camera lens. No power, no photos. So turn the camera upside down and you find the battery hatch. Use your finger to open the lock mechanism. The battery will only fit one way, so don't force it. The metal connections of the battery should be inwards into the camera. Then just align the shape of the battery. It should be as easy as just putting a little bit of pressure and you will hear a click and you will see this white plastic lock that keeps the battery in place. To remove the battery, you just flick the lock and do the opposite. Then just push the lid until you hear a click and your camera is ready to use. The battery compartment actually needs to be closed to be able to turn the power on.
We are on the home stretch. One important physical aspect of the camera left. Maybe one of the most important things, the backside.
Next to the viewfinder, you can adjust the focus of the viewfinder, especially important for me that uses glasses. Of course, we have this screen, it's a flip out screen, so we can just turn it around. The first button is the rating button. It does what it says. You can rate your photos. This can be really helpful when you do a lot of photos and you know you just nailed that specific photo. Next to the rating button is the menu button, and I guess it doesn't need any explanation, and we will go over that in detail later on. The info button lets us cycle through the different type of info screens. I use this a lot, especially when I do videography. The D-pad thumb pad can be used to cycle through menus, but when it's in spot focus mode, you can use it to actually move your spot focus to where you want your autofocus to be set. The Q button is really helpful. It is like a master menu. It will show you all important settings at once. The play button or the display button is to show your image. The thumb wheel is really good for a lot of things, especially cycling through the menu. The set button in the middle of the thumb wheel button is what it does. It sets what you have the setting, or for example, if you want to decide on a menu choice. The AF on button does what the trigger button do when you press it halfway. It puts it in autofocus. And all the way up to the right corner, we can activate different autofocus modes. Spot focus, eye tracking focus, and so on.
Now when we've gone over the entire camera, I need to mention two really important things we need to do first time we use the camera. Number one
is that you really need to have patience and charge your battery to full. Please, I know we just want to get our hands on the camera and start use it right away, but your battery will thank you and your camera will thank you if you give it the patience and actually let it charge properly. And it can take a few hours the first time you charge your battery. Just leave it in the charger until it's full. The second thing we need to do before we start to use and configure the camera is that we need to ensure that the camera has the right firmware. Firmware is the program that controls the camera. I think we could even say that it's the program that defines the camera. Each electronic device usually has a firmware. When it comes to cameras, we have the option to update the firmware, basically adding functionality that Canon has released after they manufactured the camera. That firmware is crucial to have to ensure that we have access to all the new features that didn't exist when they manufactured the camera. So how do we update the firmware? I will show you, because we're gonna need to use the SD card and a little bit of the menu. So I'm gonna show you how to update the firmware. And there is actually one little quirk that if we don't know about it, we will get stuck and not being able to actually update the firmware. And I'm gonna show you that now. Navigate to your Canon site by choice, then you go to products, mirrorless cameras, and there you find the Canon R6. Go to drivers and downloads and pick firmware. You will find the latest firmware on the top, and just ensure that you download the one that corresponds to your operating system. I'm on Windows, so I pick Windows. Then you just copy your downloaded firmware file to the root, this is important, to the root of your SD card. Once it's finished copying, just insert the SD card to your camera and turn it on. Navigate to the wrench menu and then scroll to tab 5, and here you should find upgrade firmware version. But we don't find any firmware upgrade version, right? Do you remember I told you about the quirk? This is it. The problem is if you have your camera set to auto, and this is my take on it. Canon doesn't feel that we are advanced enough when we are in auto mode to actually update the firmware. So if you put the camera in any other mode but auto and go back into the menu and tab 5, you will find a lot other options, and at the bottom you will find upgrade firmware. That was end of part 1, the physical aspects of the Canon R6, this amazing piece of camera. In part 2, we're gonna go over all the menu settings and all the settings to give you the most out of your Canon R6 as a beginner. I'm not gonna go over crazy stuff, but the important things to help you be a better photographer and get more out of the camera. As always, thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, then I know that you like it and you want me to do more content like this. If you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so as well. It will really help out the channel, and the part 2 will be linked right after this video. So until then, or until the next one, see you later. Bye bye. Hej då!